Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, for your testimony today. I wanted to talk a little bit about how your budget proposal is going to have impact on the millions of vulnerable children across this country. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the impact that I see that it will have, because I don't feel like you or this administration or Trump gets it. In America, 1 out of 5 children struggle with hunger. And for many of these children, the free lunch and breakfast that they get in school is often the only meal they get to have. Yet the budget that you're proposing, and this administration and Trump is proposing, makes a $1.7 billion cut from school meals over the next 10 years. A cut that largely would result in more than 29,000 children losing access to free school meals program in my home state of Minnesota alone. What this budget does is quite literally take food out of the mouths of children. How can these kids be expected to be present and fully present in classes, to learn in the same space as other kids? How can we expect them to reach their full potential? And how can we expect them to be able to be on the same footing as other kids around the world? I often say that budgets are a value statement, as you have many times in this committee. And you said that we are committed to having promises kept. What does this budget and your proposal in cutting the child nutrition programs say about the promises that we want to keep to children and where our values really are?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. We don't think that our budget cuts the programs that you refer to. Specifically, we think that it's important that high-income schools that are currently grouped together right now to receive benefits because they're grouped with low-income schools, that's unfair for the programs themselves. Similarly, some of the reductions that you've talked about are with regard to one-time rescissions that are not needed to be able to cover all of the children that we currently project. And we know Congress does the same analysis.
Yeah. How is the assessment made what child deserves to eat and what child doesn't? My understanding is that we should care about every single child arriving in that school, having the resources that they need to be able to get educated and be fully present. We have parents who might fall off the threshold of whatever that income is, who might not be able to pack a lunch or a breakfast or milk or a cookie or an apple for their kids. Should those kids not be able to have meals in the school so that they can be fully present in that classroom? Is that what this administration values?
We believe it's important that communities that are otherwise ineligible to receive these types of benefits not receive these benefits, and that only the communities that are eligible receive them.
But how is the judgment of what the value of the benefits is made? We are talking about children in our classrooms. We are talking about America's most vulnerable. Earlier, you talked about the harvest box. You said if they are not home, that they should pay a price.
No, I didn't say that.
That was the example you used, that if you're not home, then you pay a fee.
No.
So what penalty would you think should we propose for people who might not be home to receive juice or a cereal box or a canned meat?
I specifically was not referring to suggesting that they should pay a penalty. The point I was making, Congresswoman, is that we don't think that it matters where you are on the income scale to be able to determine a certain level of responsibility to receive in the mail that which you are expecting to receive in the mail. We think that human beings are responsible from that standpoint.
I get that. What I am saying is we have a responsibility to make sure that here in the United States, people are fed. We are talking about food. We are talking about children having food.
We agree.
We give humanitarian assistance to people around the world because we believe people should not experience food insecurity. People should not starve. But here in the United States, we decide to increase a defense budget that might lead to not having our budgets be fully intact, but we decide to say that we don't have enough money to feed our most vulnerable.
Thank you.
That is the decision we're making.
Thank you, Ms. Omar. The time has expired. The chair will now recognize Ms. Schakowsky from Illinois.
Thank you. It is incredible to me, and I want to associate myself with the remarks of Congresswoman Omar. 1 out of 5 American children is considered food insecure. That is scandalous, I think. I want to say that this budget envisions really, I think, a radically different America than I believe most Americans can and want to envision. This budget is built on the politics, I think, of division, the politics of resentment, which on the one hand should not surprise anyone, given the president who kicked off his campaign by attacks on people of color and immigrants. Anyway, on the other hand, though, I think it should surprise a lot, and does surprise a lot of people, since at his June 2015 press conference announcing his candidacy, he said, "Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it," he said. And yet the budget, you don't want to hear $845 billion, so I'll say your number, $517 billion will come out of Medicare. The budget before us cuts Medicaid by $1.5 trillion. Before really, in my view, cannibalizing it by converting it into a block grant. The budget before us cuts Social Security by $25 billion. Oh yes, those terrible entitlements that are so precious to millions and millions, the majority of American families. So, Mr. Vogt, did President Trump acknowledge he was breaking a key campaign promise when he agreed to a budget that cuts Medicare by, what are we saying now, $517 billion?
The president doesn't believe he's breaking his commitment to the American people at all. There are no structural changes to Medicare. There is no cut to Medicare. Medicare continues to grow each and every year. The president also committed to the American people that he was going to attempt to lower drug prices. And so many of the reforms within Medicare that generate savings simply because federal government pays for the drugs of seniors is because we are trying to lower, and we have proposals to lower drug costs.
That's so interesting that you would want to predict. Usually when we do budgeting, it's really not dynamic, and we talk about that you're predicting that the president is, in fact, going to end up lowering these drug prices. You build that in, and therefore cut Medicare by the projected amount that you think is actually going to be saved. Mr. Vogt, did President Trump acknowledge that he was breaking a key campaign promise when he supported the cuts to Medicaid and then turn it into a block grant?
We do not believe that we are breaking the commitment to Medicaid in the least, that Medicaid spending, in addition to where we transfer our reforms to Medicaid, the state health care block grant, will continue to grow every year.
You think that all the states in the nation, you predict that, are going to continue to make sure that low-income people, most of whom are children, are going to have as much money for Medicaid by transferring all that authority to the states to decide?
We think that the reforms that we put forward with the assumptions to have a state health care block grant can lead to better coverage at the state and local level. Medicaid is not what we would view as the optimal program. I remember when Henry Waxman said that there's not a lot of millionaires on Medicaid and wouldn't want to be on Medicaid. And we asked the question, why is that? Why is it that DeMonte Driver dies from a toothache in Medicaid because he never receives care? We don't think Medicaid is the optimal way to continue to provide health care coverage, and it's why we are supportive of many of the reforms that were in the Graham-Cassidy legislation. It's why we move forward with state health care block grants, because we're trying to do it better. We're trying to make sure that the populations that Medicaid was designed to cover get the care.
Well, it's interesting that there is not anyone involved in the Medicaid program who is involved in delivering care that really believes that this is a reform. And the good news is this budget will never become law, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Horsford from New York for 5 minutes.
From Nevada. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
From Nevada, my apology.
We contribute another $50 billion to education, so we think that more than offsets the 12% reduction that you note in terms of Department of Education.
Okay, and the $5 billion, is it $5 billion a year choice program?
It is.
$50 billion over 10 years. How do you limit it to $5 billion? Where do we get some details on the program?
We're happy to provide additional details from the Department of Education. It is an amount of money that we felt was that we could justify in the current deficit.
The details, how do you limit it? On April 15th, when people file their taxes, how do you know it's going to only be $5 billion?
Treasury will be providing guidance. If you all see fit to enact it into law, states will have quite a bit of discretion to design their programs. Their discretion would be based on Treasury rules.
This thing would have to get through Congress before
absolutely
you could, and you don't have any details yet. On the student loan crisis, what do you do for to help students pay off their student loans? So I understand you cut student loan assistance by over $200 billion.
We find savings in student loan programs, but we feel like we have put forward a proposal.
Savings like eliminating the public service loan forgiveness program, subsidized loans, and payments for account maintenance fees.
We consolidate programs to be able to offer one student income-driven repayment plan that we think will provide certainty and allow anyone that's receiving a payment now to be eligible under that. And we think it'll be certainty and very generous. After 15 years, you can walk away from your debt, and for a graduate student, after 30 years, you can walk away.
And how does that change present law?
As it consolidates, it puts forward a new proposal to do that.
Does your budget recognize the pending multi-employer pension fund crisis?
We do. We put forward premium increases to be able to further.
The premium increases are not going to deal with the hundreds of billions of dollars we're going to be on the hook for if these plans go broke. Do you have a plan to address the multi-employer pension fund crisis? We've had studies at our last hearing on the Education Committee that showed that there will be hundreds of billions of dollars in adverse impact on the federal budget. These things go broke because pensioners will not be paying as much tax. They're going to be more likely to use food stamps and Medicaid, and it'll have an impact of hundreds of billions of dollars if we don't do something. Is there a proposal to do something?
It's not the proposal that we might agree on, but there is a proposal to address this. We definitely
do you agree?
See an issue.
Do you recognize the adverse impact that if doing nothing would have?
Absolutely, we don't want that to happen.
Is that in the budget?
We have a proposal that's in the budget to increase premiums to deal with some of these pension crises.
And that's it?
Gentleman's time has expired. Thank you.